Okay, today I'm going to show you how to do finger knitting. It's a good alternative for if you're having difficulty catching on to the knitting or crocheting. You can see that I have a thicker type of a yarn here. This is what we're used to using. It's a lot thinner. If you don't have a thick yarn, you might want to pick one of these up, this type of yarn at Michael's. You can also use multiple strands of this at the same time, but it does work a little bit better and looks a little bit better if you have a thicker yarn. Okay, so I'm going to start with the tail end in the palm, and I'm going to wrap it around my first finger, go in front of my ring finger, behind, and then around the pinky. So I go in front, behind, and then wrap it around. Okay, so that kind of created one row of loops. So now I have to do that again. So I'm going to come in the front, in the back, in the front, and then I'm going to bring it back. And you can see that as I bring it back, it becomes that second loop there and around the first finger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the bottom loop of each hand and take it up and off the end, over this one and off the finger. So I'm going to pick it up, and I kind of have to bend that finger a little bit so I keep that on there and take it off the end. Then I'm going to grab the next one, bend that finger a little bit, take it over the top, take it over the top, take it over the top. Okay, so now I have to tighten that down a little bit, push these down, and now I'm going to take this again, behind, in front, behind, wrap it around, and then I'm going to lift that over the top, over the top, over the top, over the top. Push my loops down. Okay, take it behind that middle finger, in front of the ring, around, and around again. And I pick that. All I'm doing is the same thing. I'm taking that loop up and bottom loop up and over the top. So let me do a couple more rows and I'll show you what it looks like. So you're literally just picking that up and taking it off the top. We can let go of that now. Okay. Behind. So you're kind of like in and out, weaving it between your fingers. And each time we pick it up and over the top. The pinky's always falling off, so push it down a little bit. Okay, one more time. Push them down. Behind, in front, behind, come back around, behind, in front, wrap it around. Lift it up and over, lift it up and over, lift it up and over, lift it up and over. So you can see on the back how this is starting to weave together. This is actually the right side, and this is the back. So you can make a really long piece, and you can stitch them together. You can make a headband from this. You could make multiples, different colors, and stitch them together. So I have a longer one that I'm going to switch to, and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so here's a long one that I already made. It's done the same way. I just kept going. This is the good side. This is the back. And I thought it would be cool to finish this off, sew it together, and then I could make like a simple headband. I could also take two of these and stitch them together along the sides, which maybe I'll show you another time. But I want to show you how to finish this. So after you get as much length as you want, this is actually 22 inches, and I measured that would go around my head nicely to make like an ear warmer headband. Probably would be better if it was too thick. So I think I probably will make another one that looks like that. So I'm going to just do one more row just to show you again how to do it. Wrap it around, lift it up and over, lift it up and over, up and over, up and over. Okay, so when you get to the desired length, we need to, it's almost like in knitting you do a casting off, and we're kind of doing the same thing. So what you do to take this off, because if I just take my fingers out, it's all going to unravel. So I'm going to take the first one off my first finger and bring it to the middle finger and just snug it down. And then I'm going to take the bottom one and lift it up and over the top of that. And then I'm going to take that loop and move it over to my ring finger and take that bottom loop and lift it up and over the top. So I'm like eliminating those loops as I go. Now I'm going to move it over one more time, lift it up and over. So I only have one loop left. And I'm going to take my yarn and cut it pretty long. So I'm going to cut it like way over here. I still have my pinky in there. So now if I pull that yarn, that loop, and pull, it's going to come through. So now that's not going to come apart. And if I wanted to stitch these together, I could do the same as I was doing with the others, and I could thread this through my needle and stitch these two ends together to make one. But I'm going to make a second one, and then I'm going to show them, do them together, and I'll show you how that goes. Okay, so I started one with 3 different yarns. So you can see I'm using 3 different strands and 3 different colors so that you could see that. I think it's a little bit easier when you're doing multiple strands of yarn to use different colors, because then you can see them. So what I do is I just wrap the same way, but I use all 3 at the same time, and then I lift all 3 of those up and over, all 3 up and over. So this is a great way for you to make a thicker yarn if you don't have one. You know, you all have multiple strands of something. Let's see, I missed a blue there. You see that? So I got to pick that one up and over. All right, so back behind. So I'm doing exactly the same thing as I did before. I'm just wrapping with all 3 of those strands at the same time, and when I pick it up, I just pick them all up at the same time. I find that this one I'm wrapping it like a little bit tighter. And then as you work, you pull it down, and I'm going to finish this one off too, a little bit shorter just to show you again. Bring it to that finger and pick it up. Take that loop, bring it here, take the bottom one up and over, keep moving it over, and pick those guys up. You can kind of tighten that as you're going too. There we go. Okay, so here's my finished, again, pull the loop and cut all 3. So here's what it looks like if you have multiple yarns. You can see that that's a thicker. Here's one that I did with a single strand. So this is a lot like holier looking because it's not as thick. And the one with the multiple strands looks very similar to the thickness of the fatter yarn. So I made 2 out of the thicker yarn, the same length, and I'm going to use the long piece that I finished off with to sew them together. So I'm going to take that end and feed it through my large-eyed needle, and just like I would sew anything together, I'm going to start with one loop on one side and go through and catch a loop. And I'm just going to go down this entire thing, catching a loop from the end and then catching one on the other side. And this is a great way to make it wider, so I'm going to make this into a headband when I get down to the other side. And if this isn't big enough to get all the way down the end, that's okay, because I can work from the other direction too. So each one I'm just catching that loop and going down. It's good to work on a flat surface for this because that way you can kind of see what you're grabbing. And you can't really tell where I'm doing that because I'm working with the same yarn, going back and forth, so same color. And you don't want to skip any because you don't want there to be holes. That's also why I kept it long, because then I can use it like this to help me put it together. you want to try and make them end evenly. This is a little twisted, so I'm going to turn that. That can happen. You got to watch that while you're working. And I think I might just have enough yarn to get all the way down without starting from the other end. But if I had not gotten to there, I could start from this direction and go down and continue sewing. But remember, you always, no matter what you do, you always want to sew in two different directions. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to start to go backwards because that's going to lock this in. Always think about you have to get rid of this at some point. So if I cut it right where I stop, it's going to fall apart. So I'm going to go down a little bit and then I'm going to come back a little bit. And that's going to lock it in like the sewing machine would. No one's going to see it, and then I can cut this little piece off, and I can finish sewing from the opposite direction, and that way I don't have to worry about running out of yarn, and I have that secured. Okay, so I'm just going to do this a little bit. Just close up that hole. Okay, I'm going to do one more stitch and then I'm going to go backwards for the same reason, just to lock it in a little bit. And then I'm just going to go back the same direction a little bit. Okay, alright, so that's secured. Now I can cut this off. And now to make this into a headband, I can take one of the, I'm going to bring the ends together and I'm going to stitch them together. So I'm going to use one of these ends that I have left. That's why you always leave them long, as well as then it won't come apart. But you can always use these to sew everything together, whatever it is that you're making. Okay, so I'm going to take this, and I kind of like that side as my good side, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to turn it inside out, whichever side you like the best, and I'm just going to sew the two ends together. Same way, catch a loop, go all the way down to the end, and then work my way backwards all the way across. And then secure it by going the other direction. Actually, I missed a little piece. There we go. All right, now I'm going to go backwards to secure it. And then I can cut that off. Now I still have one little piece hanging here, so I do need to weave that through. Because again, for the same reason, we don't want to just cut it off because it'll fall apart. And so I'm going to just do that. I'm going to go all the way across with it. Remember, this is inside out, so you're not going to see this anyway. And then always go in a second direction. So I'm going to weave it backwards. And then I'm going to cut it off. Okay, so turn this right side out. And even with knitting on your fingers, you can make a little bit of a headband. All right, so this is actually going to fit around my head. But if you wanted it wider, you could always do another strip and add it on. So something else that you might want to try out. So try it out. Good luck.